This is the story of a little girl from Manchester, Maine, and her 2-week visit to the Soviet Union. A beautiful, very bright little girl who decided she didn't like all of the talk about the prospects of nuclear war. For the next hour, we're going to take you on a trip through the Soviet Union with Samantha Smith and her family. To Moscow, the Crimea, Leningrad. We'll see the things the Smiths saw, some of the things they didn't see. We'll learn what the trip meant, why it took place, what impact it had on Samantha. An historic trip of a lifetime for this 11-year-old girl. To Russia with Love, coming up. Last year, Samantha, 10 years old at that time, wrote a letter to Soviet leader Yuri Andropov, asking him why he wanted to start a war and why he wanted to conquer the world. Nearly a year later, this past April, Andropov wrote back to Samantha a 3-page letter detailing how the Soviet Union wanted peace. He told her it was the wish of everyone in his country that there be no war between our two countries, that there be no war at all on Earth. So that Samantha could see this for herself, Andropov invited Samantha to visit the Soviet Union.
Go, Lynn. Come on, Lynn. Come on, Lynn.
On July 7th, Samantha left home with her mother and father, Art and Jane. First to Montreal, where they were met by a crush of reporters and photographers, a taste of things to come in the next 2 weeks. Samantha would mention on several occasions how the press bugged her.
Well, Mom told me not to say this because it's not your fault, it's your job. I mean, they're really pestering.
Montreal was the worst. We had policemen that were surrounding us, and the photographers just crashed right through them. And I ended up biting one of the microphones.
On more than one occasion, Samantha would try to seek relief from the cameras and all of the questions. Before the Smiths left, her father quipped that Samantha had no profound apprehensions about the trip, but it certainly is more of an adventure than just going to Grandma's. In Moscow, Samantha had a dignitary's welcome. There were flowers and greetings from members of the Soviet Foreign Ministry who would be her guides throughout her visit. There, Samantha set the stage for her visit in the Soviet Union, hitting on a theme which we would all hear about over and over again: peace, whether it was in the form of questions from reporters or from Soviet adults and children.
If he promised me that he wouldn't start a war, Russia wouldn't start a war, and America says that they won't start a war either, then how come we keep making bombs for a war if there's no one to start it?
Samantha and her family were afforded VIP treatment. They were whisked around in Chaika limousines on their trip around the Soviet Union. There was always a motorcade with a police escort. Russian motorists and pedestrians had to get out of the way when they went by. The Smiths stayed in the best hotels, like the Sovietskaya in Moscow, which is usually reserved for special guests of the Soviet government. And the entire tab for the Smiths' Russian trip would be picked up by the Soviets. The first part of the visit, the Smiths stayed briefly in Moscow, visiting the tomb of the unknown soldier, Lenin's tomb in Red Square. And inside the Kremlin walls to the seat of the Soviet government.
From 2 holes on the palace.
News 13 photographer Matt Perry and I caught up with Samantha in the Crimea about a day and a half after she arrived there. Matt and I got caught in some red tape, so to speak. One Soviet press person wouldn't let us join the rest of the press group until she saw in black and white that we were accredited. So we were virtually held hostage in the hotel while we waited for someone to relay the message from Moscow to the Crimea. The view from the hotel was really beautiful, but we wanted to be with Samantha at Camp Artek, only a few miles away. This is one instance of how the Russians controlled the trip and the news coverage of it. Samantha became the heroine of Artek, that is the camp on the Black Sea for Soviet children and kids from other countries. When we found Samantha, it was her second day at the camp, and she had been busy every minute. She was sightseeing, swimming in the Black Sea, writing notes of peace to world leaders, putting them in bottles and then throwing them into the sea. She was enjoying the attention of the Soviets, but she was visibly tired, not having recuperated yet from jet lag and trying to keep up with the hectic schedule. Artek is one place that Soviet leader Yuri Andropov really wanted Samantha to see, to meet and talk with kids her own age, and to see for herself that everyone in the Soviet Union wants peace and friendship. Artek is the largest children's camp in the Soviet Union. 4,000 children were here during Samantha's visit. Children from 9 to 14 who excel in their studies and in pioneer activities. These pioneer activities include a pledge to communism. While we were all at Artek watching the fun and the games of children's camp, much like the summer camps for American children, there was another side to Artek we were not seeing. A side shown on Soviet television and picked up by CBS Moscow correspondent Don McNeil. It was a report that raised the ire of the Soviets and which nearly led to McNeil's expulsion from the Soviet Union.
Throughout this visit, little Samantha has been shown the Soviet Union's peaceful image. As correspondent Don McNeil reports, that's just half the picture.
Artek, the Communist Party's #1 pioneer camp, is putting on its happiest face for Samantha Smith. At a swimming meet, young boys dressed up as sea devils bring screams of delight from the children as they threaten to throw them in the pool. There are swimming exercises and obstacle races, all in good fun as the Soviets wish to portray themselves to Samantha and the visiting Western press as a peace-loving country. But there is another side to Artek that Samantha will never see. These young pioneers are out on a different kind of exercise, learning to patrol the beaches day and night, learning to handle the automatic weapons they carry. As part of their summer session at the exclusive camp, they are trained by a special section of the secret police, the KGB Border Patrol. According to the Soviet commentary, they learn how to assemble a submachine gun, how to operate a searchlight. They are put through a special obstacle course, especially designed for their age. Boys and girls alike are put through rigorous training by professional officers. Every one of them, the commentary says, will learn strength, will, and character to defend the motherland. Their slogan will always be, "March to the defense of the border of the Soviet Union." But for Samantha, there will be no night patrols on lonely beaches. Instead, a festival of clowns and laughing bears at an evening concert where the slogan is, "Peace and Friendship." Don McNeil, CBS News, Moscow.
But Artek was one of Samantha's most memorable experiences of her Russian trip, getting to meet children her own age, and finding out that kids are basically the same anywhere in the world.
The kids here and all the people here are really much like Americans, except for the language. And I didn't have any trouble making friends with the in our tech, let's say with the children there that spoke English, and I even have one friend, Stieta, that doesn't speak English.
One night, the young pioneers staged a show that would rival Las Vegas. On Samantha's last night, a big send-off by the children at Artec for their little friend from the United States.
I shall miss my new international friends, but we will remain friends across the sea. Let our countries be friends too. Someday I hope to return. I love you, Artec.
From the Crimea, Samantha would visit Leningrad. But on the way, a stop first in a town called Simferopol, a stop that not only tickled Samantha's palate, but those of the adults. We stopped at a state-run experimental farm where Samantha got to eat fruit right from the tree, then sample a table full of treats, peaches, plums, apricots, and raspberries the size of strawberries.
They're huge, red. I know they are. Giant raspberries.
It was at the farm that we first learned that Samantha was feeling homesick, that she'd just as soon be home.
I can't wait till it's over. Let it out, jeepers.
Like what?
To let it out. I can't wait till the trip's over. Let it out. I'm homesick.
But there were new adventures waiting for Samantha in Leningrad. Visits to dazzling palaces that belonged to Russian czars, plus a lesson in war and peace, when To Russia with Love continues. There is one part of Samantha's trip to Leningrad we wish we could show you, but we don't have the videotapes. They were lost by the Soviets on a flight between Leningrad and Moscow. It was Samantha's first full day in Leningrad, a beautiful city along the Neva River. It's a city known for its heroism and revolutionary tradition. It is a perfect place for the Soviets to give a lesson on war and peace. First, Samantha visited a cemetery where 600,000 Leningrad men, women, and children are buried, victims of World War II. Samantha laid a wreath there, and in the background on a PA system were the strains of the funeral dirge. From there, Samantha went to the House of Friendship and Peace. It's a former private house and now is the site of the Leningrad branch of the Union of Soviet Societies for Friendship and Cultural Relations with Foreign Countries. And it is there that Samantha and her family were shown a very powerful film on the horrors of war and how Leningrad coped or did not cope with World War II. A vivid lesson on the ramifications of war and the beauty of peace.
Good morning, dear son. We are glad to see you in our palace. My name is Xana. I am a member of International French Club, and I would like to show you our palace.
It's exactly a week into Samantha's visit now, and on this particular day, it's a day of children. first the Palace of Pioneers in Leningrad. It was her second encounter with pioneers, the first being at Artek, the children's camp in the Crimea. The palace is a place where pioneers go in their free time to play, to join clubs, and nurture any talents they might have, as in music or art. The Soviets feel it is important for the growth of the child. The pioneers gave Samantha a tour of their house and put on a show. For the past week, all Samantha and the rest of us were seeing were smiling, beautiful kids, works of art, and beautiful buildings. The Soviets saw to it that we saw the very best. But there was one thing over which they had no control. Samantha's Chaika limousine decided to call it quits outside the Palace of Pioneers. It was an embarrassment for our friends at the Foreign Ministry, as people and presents were transferred to another car, and the Chaika was pushed away. After switching cars, it was off to Solnichnaya, a sanatorium for preschool children. The children here are treated for varying kidney, heart, and bronchial disorders. The sanatorium is situated in a wooded area on the Gulf of Finland, and it's equipped with a playground, a small zoo, a motor track, in an effort to create an atmosphere the Soviets feel is essential in successful treatment of the child. The Soviets delighted in showing off their facility to Samantha. Leningrad is a city where Lenin led two revolutions, the most famous being the uprising of 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution, the beginning of socialism in the Soviet Union. All of the property of the Tsars was seized and now belongs to the state. Two palaces of the Tsars were the focus of Samantha's visit. One, Petrovorets, the summer palace of Peter the Great, a palace of fountains. The palace was virtually destroyed by the Germans during World War II. It was rebuilt in the 15 years following the war. All of the buildings and the entire underground pipe system that feeds the hundreds of fountains at the palace. Peter the Great is said to have been a precocious man that loved to play practical jokes on people, especially his ladies-in-waiting. In the gardens, he devised some little pranks for people who just might be walking there. You step on a certain rock and you get sprayed, as Samantha found out. We also visited the Hermitage, the former winter palace of Peter the Great, and now the largest museum in the world. We were not allowed to take pictures inside. Seeing these palaces was somewhat of a paradox. The Soviets showed them proudly with all of their splendor. But there was also that constant reminder that the buildings are now owned by the state. In the Russians' eyes, a victory over the wealthy, powerful, and wicked Tsars. In Leningrad, we got the first real opportunity to talk to Samantha about her trip. By this time, she'd fallen in love with the Soviet Union and wanted to come back every year. But she talked again of being homesick.
I miss everything.
By Leningrad, the trip was taking its toll on Art Smith, Samantha's father. In fact, he dropped out of sight for a day of rest from the hectic schedule.
Well, our hosts have overwhelmed us with the reception that they've made here for us, and we have rushed to keep up. not always adequately, but we're trying to keep up with the schedule. And it's really breathtaking. The Soviets, of course, wish Samantha to see everything, and it's not possible to quite see everything, but there's a lot to be seen, and we're trying to pack it into a 2-week stay. At least get some sense of the variety of Soviet life, and it's a culture that's enormous in order to fill this geography here, and we've only really scratched the surface and seeing the most prominent landmarks, but we've certainly seen a lot.
He was asked if the family had stopped to ponder, why us?
Every day. Think about it at least every day. There's no answer to that question, though. It's just the luck of the draw. I think Samantha's letter was couched in strong, clear language. And she asked out of her innocence the kind of questions that many people perhaps feel, but don't take the time or don't have the courage to ask. And it just happened that she was there at the right moment, and President Andropov was there at the right moment.
While the crush of reporters and photographers wasn't as great now as the beginning of the trip or the way it was going to be later, the news media was ever present. The Soviet press particularly, with their 35mm movie and still cameras recording every move the little American took, not to mention the rest of us, the Americans. The amount of news coverage by Western journalists in the Soviet Union for this trip was unprecedented. For Samantha, we were often an unnecessary evil. After 4 days in Leningrad, Samantha and family boarded the midnight train to Moscow, where the anticipation was building for a possible meeting with Yuri Andropov. It's an 8-hour train trip that leaves Leningrad to the strains of the city's own theme. To Russia with Love will continue. The Soviets had lined up a vigorous schedule for the Smiths in Moscow, but so they could get some rest, a few things on the itinerary were canceled. But there was one event Samantha was not going to miss, a Russian circus. She was the guest of the new Circus, one of 2 circuses in Moscow, and I was her invited guest for the night. This was the last performance of the season, and therefore was very special. One thing unique to Russian circuses is bears. One of Samantha's favorite acts was a backward flip by a man on stilts. Many of the activities on Samantha's itinerary have included things that would be of interest to an 11-year-old, including this one of the biggest economic exhibitions. At the exhibition, another reminder of war. Statues of Soviet children who died during the war. One of them was Samantha's age, 11. The exhibition has examples of crafts made by Soviet children. There are children's technical and space exhibits. And once again, we saw beautiful fountains. It was on occasions like this that Samantha would like to break free, get away from the crowds and all of the attention, run or talk with someone, as she did with me. But the photographers always managed to catch up. During Samantha's visit, she met many Russians, but she also met American tourists along the way. At the exhibition, a tour group from New York lined up to take her picture. One man asked her if she was tired of it all yet. She replied, "No way." And it was those American tourists who looked with interest on Samantha's visit.
Well, it was quite exciting, to say the least, mainly because she's getting the VIP treatment all the way, and then every time we hear a siren coming, there she comes whizzing right by us. It's an incredible VIP system, as a matter of fact.
How does that make you feel, being an American and watching this?
Well, it's really kind of a nice thing for us to see, you know, a little girl getting all this attention. However, I must say that all foreign tourists do get a slight VIP treatment anyway. Like, there are certain hours where the tourists come in and out of these museums, and you have preferential treatment as far as autos, but of course hers is way up and above anything that any tourist could possibly get.
I think it's great.
I think it's
I
fantastic.
really is. I think it's good publicity. It's good for everyone.
It puts things in a little bit better perspective, because you're looking at it as a one-to-one, as a child speaking out.
Yeah, we're cementing good
nobody
relationships
wants
that
war.
way.
Come on.
Sure, no one.
Did you ever see anybody march saying, "We want war, we want to kill"? You know, everybody wants peace. Well, we just want to raise our children
Everyone wants it a different
and have
way.
a peaceful world and get the most that we can out of it.
We've already mentioned the number of Soviet press people that accompanied Samantha on the trip, those from Soviet Life, Pravda, TASS, and Soviet television. Samantha's picture was in the newspapers and on Soviet television all the time.
И вот сегодня вместе с родителями она приехала на спектакль театра имени Дурова. Этот сказочный дворец, единственный в мире театр зверей, построен для советской детворы. Здесь, на его спектаклях, они приобщаются к миру животных.
Moscow is the capital of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. It took over as the country's capital in 1918, the year after the Bolshevik Revolution in Leningrad. Moscow is considered the biggest economic and cultural center of the Soviet Union. Millions of people live here, and wherever you look, there are high-rise apartment buildings, part of the Soviet 5-year plan. The right of housing is stipulated in the Soviet Constitution. Moscow is a city of museums, exhibitions, theaters, and concert halls. And one of Samantha's days was filled taking it all in. A perfect time for her to catch up on picture taking.
Which you can see, they date back to the 15th century.
There was a visit back to Red Square. That name goes back to 1662, red meaning beautiful in the old Slavonic language. There was a visit to an old abbey where prominent Soviets are buried, among them Nikita Khrushchev. Samantha visited the Bolshoi Theater.
And we think that you are a very honored guest of this theater. So, just a memory of your visit to this theater.
and there was a stop at the Animal Theater.
Садись на креслице. Садись, садись. Вот так.
Новый танец, который она решила предложить вам всем, ребята. Ведь дружба рождается в игре. Очень хороший. Слоновий чартер.
Samantha had a special meeting with the first woman cosmonaut, Valentina Tereshkova, now head of the Soviet Women's Committee. Samantha's Moscow visit included a boat cruise down the river, accompanied again by children wearing those familiar uniforms of the young pioneers. Moscow is a city with a great sports tradition, too. Samantha was taken to the quickest cycle track in the world. People from all over the Soviet Union train here for competition. There are clubs for children to introduce them to sports of all kinds. The director told the Smiths the arena is not only for commercial purposes, but to involve all people in sports, because it's their feeling that the healthier a person is, the better that person works. And after a lengthy adjustment to a bike, Samantha had to turn around the track.
Так, держи. Спасибо.
Samantha had most of her fun when she got the chance to participate in an event, rather than being an observer. She watched young gymnasts practicing at the arena, then she got the chance to do it herself. Samantha's last full day in Moscow, and she and the family visited another pioneer palace. Many people thought that this was going to be the day that she would meet Yuri Andropov. Many signs pointed to that meeting. It was a luncheon and the pioneers, but the rest of the day schedule was up in the air, and Soviet officials were not saying one way or another. Even the Smiths were all dressed up. And because it was her last full day here, it was a mob scene. Those reporters and photographers who had dropped out of Samantha's visit along the way were back in force. Even members of the news media admitted that it would be nice if on Samantha's last full day that there wouldn't be so much chaos surrounding her.
Завал? Попало? Ну, попало. Вместе с нашим грузом вместе они были... Сколько? Ну, секунда, Саша, всего секунду. Осторожней там.
And the children at the Young Pioneers Palace pressed to be near Samantha wherever she moved. The children presented Samantha with a Russian folk costume called a sarafan and a headpiece, a kokoshnik. And of course, there was more dancing. By the end of the day, there was no meeting with Andropov, but Samantha wasn't disappointed. We'll hear from her when To Russia with Love returns. There was no meeting with Yuri Andropov. No one said there definitely would be, but no one said there wouldn't. Members of the news media were speculating the when and not the if. We all waited outside Samantha's hotel for a word or a sign. Instead of a personal visit, Andropov sent a deputy bearing gifts, a samovar, a teapot, a lacquer jewelry box, and 2 photo albums. Plus, a message congratulating Samantha on the success of her trip and for bringing the news that American and Soviet children have a great deal in common in working for peace. Samantha wasn't disappointed.
As long as he sent his deputy over to our hotel, that's good enough.
What, if you had met with him, what were you going to tell him?
I don't know, I probably wouldn't be able to say anything.
Mother Jane was philosophical.
Well, it certainly would have been an honor to have met him, but I think it's not surprising, and we were honored as well to have met Mr. Zemyak.
Why didn't Samantha meet with Andropov? It apparently wasn't because of his health, which has been failing for some time. The day before Samantha left, he was seen on Soviet TV in comparatively good health, meeting with visiting dignitaries. Andropov, who usually sits on such occasions, stood when he delivered his remarks. The message to Samantha was that he was too busy to meet with the littlest diplomat from the West. Samantha told reporters the deputy had no message from Andropov to United States officials. And there was no written message from the Soviet leader to Samantha, but a business card with his name on it. And Samantha thought it was because he heard that she'd been collecting cards throughout her trip. What happens now? Will there be a book?
Well, it's hard to tell exactly how this will work out, but we certainly plan to tell the Americans that the Soviets are kind, warm people, and that they too want peace, and we need to talk more and become better acquainted with each other as people, so I think.
Samantha was asked if she thought Americans have the wrong idea about the Soviet Union.
Some of them do. But the people that have been to the Soviet Union have a definite answer of not wanting war at all and wanting peace, just like I do.
After spending 2 weeks in a strange land, several thousand miles from home, it was time for Samantha to return home. She had seen the best of what the Russians had to offer: the palaces, museums, the works of art, the beautiful landscapes of the Crimea and Leningrad. She had nothing but the best treatment, with the best hotels, personal guides, and interpreters. She did not fulfill her dream of meeting Soviet President Andropov, but she had fallen in love with the people and the country.
The place is absolutely beautiful. The people are absolutely as kind as anybody could possibly be. It's paradise.
Her message to the people back home would be the same message that brought her here in the first place: peace and goodwill for all people. Months after Andropov invited Samantha to visit the Soviet Union, people are still asking why. Why would a world leader write a 3-page letter to an 11-year-old girl about nuclear war? Was it just for her benefit, or was it part of a plan? A political message, perhaps, to the United States that the Soviet Union wants peace, or, more importantly, a reduction in nuclear stockpiles. Was Samantha being used for that purpose, to be an emissary, to bring a message of peace to her own president from the Soviet leader? Was it a propaganda ploy to make the Soviet Union look good in the eyes of Americans, the rest of the world, and, of course, at home, while talks continue on the deployment of U.S. missiles in Europe? Why Samantha? Was she the only little American that had written such a letter? Some people have said that she was just too cute and too bright to have been a coincidence. Perhaps she was carefully picked. One Soviet official told me Samantha's trip was a gesture of peace, not propaganda. Was Samantha used for propaganda purposes? American Ambassador Arthur Hartman says that is not the case. Rather, he says, Samantha's visit has been a big plus for the United States. At home, family, friends, and well-wishers were waiting. For whatever reason, they were proud of this little girl from Manchester, Maine. Samantha's trip ended much the way it began, with lots of people at the Augusta airport and that crush of reporters and photographers waiting for that last piece of wisdom from the youngster who spent 2 weeks in the Soviet Union at the invitation of the country's president. But Samantha was tired and would have nothing for them today. She wanted to get home to Grandma, her friend Lynn, and her dog Kim. About 6 miles from the airport, home was waiting in the small town of Manchester. Family was waiting too. Samantha was homesick no more. But rest would have to wait. The next day, Manchester pulled out the stops for Samantha. The town was going to have a parade anyway as part of their annual festival, but now they had a special guest, a special reason for this parade, the little girl they were calling their ambassador. They were mighty proud.
Great. I really envy her beautiful trip, and I think she's done a beautiful job. She's a very poised child and is very natural and lovely.
She's been an ambassador for the town of Manchester and the United States both, and we're all proud of her.
She put us on the map nationwide, and we're very, very proud of her, and we're so glad to have her home.
Proud, but concerned, too, what effect this trip and all of the attention would have on Samantha.
I just hope that Samantha can get back to being a real little girl that she is and not be swayed and changed by all this.
I think many people have mixed feelings. Some people feel she's being exploited, and others think that if it brings peace, then it's a good thing.
I question the validity of the true picture that the Kremlin was painting for this child. And I kind of feel that perhaps the child has been used as a pawn in a game of chess.
But those feelings didn't put a damper on the festivities at all. Manchester's children were in the parade, clowns and beauty queens, the fire department, a band. Nothing could diminish the fact that Samantha was home. She had conducted herself well, and she had put little Manchester on the map, never to be confused again with Manchester, New Hampshire. Important to Samantha was the fact that she was back home with her friend Lynn, whom she had talked about often on her trip.
When I saw her on TV when she's in Russia, I wish that I could see her in the flesh and not just on TV.
Did you miss each other a lot?
I don't know if she missed me, but I missed her.
Yep, I do. I did too. I kept thinking every night, why isn't Lynn here with me?
Even the governor, Joseph Brennan, was there. He called this the summer of Samantha.
Samantha, you have certainly captured the hearts of the people of this state, of this nation, and indeed in other parts of the world. And you've done that with grace, with charm, and with a simple but eloquent message of peace. But we are truly very, very proud of you. You've been absolutely outstanding, and you've been an inspiration not only for kids, but for all of the people. Thank you very, very much.
Samantha was presented the key to the town. Then she had her say.
Thanks an awful lot. And I'm awful glad to be home.
I'm writing you this letter because I'm so confused. See, I'm only 10 years old, already so much to lose. The country wishes peace, so does yours, you say. When I watch the news each night, I hear about D-Day. Seems to me with technology, we learn to help each other. Satellites, silicone chips, we could do much better. You say you'll help, war's never been the way. It's time to stop just talking, you've said all you can say. It seems to me, with all I can see, we should all be helping one another.
It isn't over yet for Samantha. There are numerous television appearances before her, nationally and locally. But she seems unchanged. All of the attention, the worldwide attention, has not spoiled her. She remains a little schoolgirl from Manchester. She delights in being a regular kid again.
To Russia with Love has been brought to you in part by the Maine State Lottery, Diet Coke, and Shop and Save.